Hello and welcome to the Vita Group Sustainable Podcast Series with myself, Mike Murray, Chief Innovation Officer of the Vita Group.
And me, Natalie Watson, Group Head of Sustainability. Together, we're going to be unravelling some of the common misconceptions of foam and actually tackling how it can be an enabler to the circular economy.
So join us, along with some of our colleagues and guests, as we explore the world of sustainability in PU foam.
Michel, thank you so much for joining us. Just introduce to our hopefully millions of followers who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Natalie. So my name is Michel Baumgartner. I'm the Secretary General of Europur. Europur is the European Association of Flexible Polyurethane Foam Blocks Manufacturers, which is a very long name for people who make polyurethane foam, which is used mostly in upholstered furniture, bedding, transportation, and really everyday life applications, even kitchen sponges. So it's something we use every day without always being able to put a name on it.
Yeah, for sure. How long have you been at Europur?
10 years.
10 years.
10 years, and trying to accompany the industry on a journey to sustainability. It's very exciting times for us. And
touching on the point of sustainability then, is that always been a kind of a focus point for Europur, or is it something that's more recent?
It's more recent because our industry is traditionally based on transforming fossil-based raw materials into a plastic. Polyurethane foam is a plastic. But in recent years, we've been trying to work a lot more at focusing on our entire supply chain, because foam producers, they're very often placed in between chemical raw material suppliers and the furniture producers, retailers, and so on. And nowadays, like many other manufacturing industries, we also have to think about how our products will reach their end of life and how they will be treated. So there's a whole new array of initiatives taking place to make polyurethane more sustainable.
Is that something that Europur get heavily involved in, that end-of-life process, recyclability of foam, like pushing back from that kind of prehistoric misconception that foam is single-use plastics, therefore bad for the environment? It's always been the case?
Well, polyurethane is used in products that have a very long lifetime, so the problematic is completely different from single-use plastics, for example. Industry has historically been focused on durability, making products that last even longer. People use their mattresses 12, 15 years. Your sofa lives 20, sometimes 30 years. So we've been very good at that. We've been very good at making materials that are glued together that last forever, and now we have to change the paradigm and actually make things that are disassemblable, that can be repaired, that can be recycled efficiently. So it's a change in mindset. As a trade association, we can provide a platform where our members can discuss things. We have extended the membership to the whole supply chain. We now also welcome recyclers, so people can get together, they can create consortia. It's also a competitive environment, so a trade association cannot do everything. Of course, the companies do the bulk of the work.
That's a really interesting dynamic, isn't it, now, including more reverse logistics players, so the recycling centres. I think that's really going to inform decision making for the industry, isn't it, do you think?
We hope so. We're beating the drum also about all these issues inside the sector, because we are a sector that's very varied, from multinational companies which have the staff and capabilities to maybe address sustainability more easily as compared to small companies where the CEO has to be chief HR, chief accounting, chief finances, chief marketing, and now also chief sustainability. So it's about providing a platform, but also informing the people, maybe taking them by the hand sometimes to make them understand a number of issues. Also, legislation is evolving with long-term objectives that we need to explain to them, and then we need to explain to them also which intermediate steps they can be taking to actually reach those long-term objectives.
I guess that's quite a complex dynamic, isn't it? Having the bigger players with the kind of smaller SME organisations, but arguably each organisation has their own role to play. Quite as important as each other.
Yeah, and we do have members that are relatively small companies, but they chose for themselves a niche where they try to be very active. Sometimes that niche is sustainability. Sometimes it is about making products that no one else makes. It's for me it's a fascinating environment these days, and also then to see collaborations popping up with companies that are very far apart in completely different sectors, and then they tell me they met at a meeting of a trade association, so that makes you happy. That actually some of the intangible work you're doing actually delivers concrete results just by favoring that networking.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point around how we've got to the point in our sort of sustainability journeys where actually we can't do it alone anymore. Single companies, looking to develop their own products on their own, those times are gone. And I think, having observed, the last few years since I joined Vita, the whole, journey and impetus behind that sustainability move is just gaining pace. And I think it is a recognition that, we can't do this on our own.
No, it's a lot about ecosystems. You see more and more consortia coming up, grouping universities, raw material suppliers, foam producers, of course, recyclers. In some countries we have now what is called extended producer responsibility schemes that take care of the collection and dismantling of mattresses and furniture, but then they need to find outlets for the materials, and so it's a very dynamic environment where companies that actually weren't used to talking to each other all of a sudden are collaborating, and that's a nice thing to see.
Yeah, it is. Particularly around, I think, be interesting to get your views on what Natalie mentioned earlier around the perception of foam being single use, the fact that you can't recycle end of life, and almost to the point of, foam is bad and bad for the environment. And how are you and the trade association looking at how we can address that?
Well, I mean, foam is bad. I wouldn't agree with that. But no, I mean, clearly we are moving from a linear pathway to one that is a lot more complex. You can integrate recycled content into foam. You can make foam with more sustainable raw materials. There's plenty of different sources. Raw material suppliers these days are really innovative. Some companies are really trying to recycle foam into raw materials to make foam. Some are trying to use recyclates from other supply chains to make foam. And then at the end of the chain, you do have companies that produce recyclates, and they are trying to find new outlets that nobody thought about before to actually push foam into new supply chains. So I think it's also we need to see that as an opportunity for polyurethanes as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think something that we speak about at Vita is trying to put it from a science-based approach. How do you actually calculate the benefits of what you're doing? And I know as an industry we're now looking to put life cycle analysis data behind that. And I think Europur have really taken the lead to try and make that an industry standard, which I think is tremendous for us.
Yeah, that's an absolutely essential point from my opinion, because I often compare making foam to making a cake. You take a certain number of ingredients, some of which are essential, isocyanates and polyols, but you can add many other ingredients, and the foam you make, the result will be dependent on the choice of the raw materials you took, and also on the magic of the foam producer. Now, knowing that, when you want to increase the sustainability of the foam you're making, you have more and more the choice of using different raw materials. They can be bio-based, they can be CO2 polyols, they can be recycled polyols, they can be so-called mass balance raw materials. But some raw materials might have a very good CO2 impact, but they might have a not so good impact on land use, water use, etc., and other parameters. So it's not just by saying, I use 1% of this and now job done, my foam is sustainable. You really need to look at what is the mix of ingredients you use, what improvements you can bring to your production processes, because foam production itself also has an impact. And the only way of then being able to deliver a truthful picture and not ending up comparing apples and pears is to really use data and science and where possible certification to come to an end result, so that the discussion in the supply chain and with the customers of foam producers is based on facts rather than on feelings.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. So much around the sustainability agenda is around emotion. People make emotional choices and emotional claims, and I think all we can do is put the facts and the science on the table. And we're not saying one material is better than something else or one material is bad, but let's look at the real true impacts and understand them, and that helps us dictate our path to move forward.
I think just touching on the legislation piece that you mentioned as well, I think we're seeing a lot of legislation coming out of the EU Green Deal, which has been extremely disruptive, but I think from my perspective, I think it's been a long time coming, and I'm quite excited about this space. But how do you think this is going to kind of shape the industry, kind of short term, but then also get us to where we need to be on our path to net zero?
Well, it's going to push us to use more sustainable raw materials. I talked about that quite a lot already. It's also going to push us to have data. I mean, the European Commission has said several times, no data, no market. And that's exactly what is happening. One might agree or disagree, but the plan is that in the future, most products will be bearing a certain environmental score, which will be based on the CO2 output that was emitted for making the product. Mm-hmm. And that means that the whole supply chain needs to start gathering and communicating data until the production and the placing on the market of the final product. So it's something completely new. Few industries are prepared for that. And that's why we have to actually also in our supply chain make all efforts to make sure that this data is available and can be transmitted in the supply chain, starting with raw material suppliers, foam producers, and later on mattress furniture manufacturers. And you see that these discussions are ongoing. The automotive industry is currently working on a system called Catenna-X. Cars are very complex products made out of thousands of components, and to be able to calculate the carbon footprint of a car at the production stage, you need to gather information on each and every small bolt, filter, and joint to be able to get to the final calculation. So it's a tremendous effort. But again, we were talking about science-based approaches. It's the only correct one when you think about it, because otherwise you might be doing things that you feel have an impact, but it may be negligible, or it may even be adverse in the grand scheme of things.
And it's just so important, isn't it, for making sure that claims are substantiated, we're not misleading in any way, and to build trust. I think that we're in a polarised society more than ever before, where unfortunately trust is probably at its lowest point. So bringing legislation in line with accountability, I'm really excited about. I think that hopefully it will kind of accelerate us to where we need to be in terms of transparency and authenticity, which as an industry I'm sure will be welcome.
European Union is also working on legislation now on green claims.
Yeah, that's right.
Because there's plenty of studies that show that consumers are, as you said, very critical with green claims, and they want them more than other claims to be substantiated with data. And that's why legislation is now coming, saying that certain things you can't say anymore, certain things you have to say, or you can say, provided you have certification that goes with it, and then other more simple things you have a certain higher level of freedom. It's change is coming.
Yeah, it is, but I think the legislation around greenwashing is just so important.
Yeah.
I think we've all been to exhibitions and we've walked around and we've seen some of the claims and gone, where did they get that out? That really is pretty brassy to put that claim out there, to say the least.
Absolutely,
But I think it does the industry damage. When you say actually this material's 100% sustainable or 100% recyclable, you just lose credibility. So I think it's important we get it right, but it's also important that we move forward, as you say, as an industry where let's the science and the facts do the talking, and just make the right decisions for the right reasons.
I think I read that in the EU Commission they said that up to 50% of claims can't be substantiated. So, when you look at that, there's an absolute need to almost swing completely the other way and make sure that we are meticulous now with what we claim. And I know within Vita we're taking it absolutely seriously by bringing policy, procedures, process in-house, making sure that all claims can be backed up, as Mike said, with science-based facts, because we won't get anywhere with kind of fictitious claims, because I think that's what we need to step back and think. It's just about genuine progress. This is what we want to make here,
And a lot of people see that as a mountain that's impossible to climb. However, a long time ago, when I started working in Brussels, we were working on the legislation on food claims. And it's exactly the same problematic. At the time you had so many food products that were saying that they were good for your health, that they were going to extend your lifetime by so many years, etc., with no scientific evidence behind it whatsoever. That legislation has been in place for a long time, and nowadays we have these Nutri-scores on products when you buy them in the supermarkets, etc. And people find that normal nowadays, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think about going back to the good old times where people could sell you snake oil. Well, it's going to be the same with sustainability. In a couple of years' time, I think it will just be standard practice and people will be used to it.
I hope so. I think there will be a time potentially where we just buy products again, and that manufacturing is just sustainable. We are responsible with how we're set up, with how our feedstocks are coming in. We get external validation and verification of the materials that we procure, and we bring products to market that are, by their very nature, responsible and sustainable. We're in a transition period, I think, now, maybe for the foreseeable, though.
Now, one thing that's also close to our heart and that we try to advocate on very hard is Europe needs a level playing field, because European companies are innovative, they make high quality products, they can do incredible things on sustainability. But if our borders are just open to products that are made under completely different conditions on other places of the planet with no regards whatsoever to sustainability sometimes, you can't ask European companies to do miracles and compete successfully. So that's one of the things where we try to advocate for, and that's why we also signed the European Declaration for Industrial Policy, because we need to have both sides of the coin.
Absolutely, this is so important, isn't it? Again, having that joined up approach, isn't it? I think, it's really important. But we've seen some transformational innovation kind of breaking into the industry over the last 5 to 10 years. I know, Mike, your team are heavily involved in that behind the scenes as well. But it's an exciting time, isn't it, for the polyurethane industry, really having such innovation.
It's an incredibly exciting time. When I started 10 years ago in this industry, I came from the automotive supply chain. Before that I had worked in sugar. And people are a little bit conservative in here. I remember when I started talking about recycling EPR schemes, which we have done in batteries for a very, very long time. People said, yeah, but polyurethane foam, you should just burn it at the end of life. And I was like, yeah, I'm not so sure. And then within a couple of years' time, we saw that people start collecting mattresses, dismantling, putting the foam into reactors, producing new raw materials that companies like yours used to make new foam with. And the mindset, the environment has completely changed, and now we see investments into industrial scale factories that produce more and more of these recycled raw materials. So there's been a cultural change in the industry, and I think that's a great thing.
No, it's been fabulous to watch, and I think all the paradigms have been challenged over the last few years. I think a few years ago we were saying, maybe only 5-10% of a biopolyol could be added without dramatically changing properties, and now there are products out there with 20-30 combinations of up to 100% replacing for certain applications. So that's a really exciting time, and in such a short period. And I think certainly what I've observed is, we've been lucky enough to recruit some really innovative young talent in recent years. And the people that wanting to come into the industry, they want to make a difference. They want to push those boundaries. They want to make more sustainable, innovative products. And I think that, combined with the years of know-how that exist in the industry, is really helping us, begin to go at pace and speed.
Yeah, what you're seeing in the industry is an incredible increase in the variety of competences you have in companies. I mean, traditionally, foam producers, they had chemical engineers to work on formulations, and then people working on transformation. And nowadays, you see a real effort to hire people that come from all possible other industries to try and learn the lessons of what was done elsewhere. You see companies making a lot of effort going to universities, trying to engage with students, explain that in the PU industry there's a lot of opportunities. And that's also a change. It's this opening up from our traditional pool of competences to completely new people and trajectories.
Yeah, and opening up the world of PU foam to a whole new audience. I think every time I've been lucky enough to be invited to speak at universities and talk about our world, and it's never been a time when people don't come away and I had no idea. People just don't realise how broad the applications of PU foam are, and how it really does touch you in everything you do.
Yeah, there was maybe sometimes, PU foam in a lot of markets where it's being used is in almost a situation of monopoly. There's just no better alternative. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, when designers or architects starting asking questions, we were a little bit sometimes complacent, I would say. But nowadays, we're really trying to engage them, saying, PU foam is not a commodity. You have so much varieties of it. You can have so many options. So if your concern is this or that, then we have the answer. But it takes a lot of explanation, and we're probably getting sometimes a little bit out of our traditional zone of stakeholders and engage a lot with people who are a lot further down the supply chain, up the supply chain, and that also beyond the sustainability topic makes it very exciting, because you talk about so many different things, and sometimes people ask questions that as an industry we need to address as well.
Yeah, I was speaking to a professor recently, and he said his view was that PU foam, if it had been discovered in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, it would have been called click chemistry and got the Nobel Prize. And actually, the fact that it's 75-year-old, it's seen as an old technology, but I think we're still beginning to find out what it can do.
It's such a versatile material, isn't it? And I think we've already mentioned words like durability, recyclability, lightweight, and for that reason it operates in multiple markets across many different industries. And I think we get the sustainability mix right, our impact is is fundamental. I would argue that it has a potential to be a disruptive material.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, we produce in Europe about 1.3 million tons of polyurethane foam. So that may not talk a lot to the audience, but I once made the calculation. It's 17 to 20 times the Great Pyramid of Giza that we put on the market every year. That's a lot of foam, and it's great.
Yeah.
But if it's not treated well at the end of life, it's also a shame, and it's a loss of resources that in those days when energy is expensive, when raw materials are scarce, Europe can just not afford. So we also need to pay attention to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that point around end of life foam actually being a valuable resource, and we should treat it in that way is really good. And certainly, as you say, all the recycling, whether it's mechanical or whether it's chemical, great strides, but still so many more to come.
I think because of the durability aspect, reuse, it has a huge reuse potential. Just because the product it's surrounded in or sat in has reached its end of life, foam, because of its durability, can go on to have second and third lives in other materials as well. And that, in the kind of waste hierarchy is even better, isn't it, before we even get to recycling. So,
which is something that many other materials that are considered competitive materials don't have. They don't have that durability. They can't be closed loop recycled, and I think that's the part that we need to continue to promote around the benefits of PU foam.
One thing that is very important in that regard is that it also needs support from the outside. I mean, if you want to recycle PU foam and not waste the resources, I really believe that you need to set up extended producer responsibility schemes.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
We have some in Netherlands, Belgium, France, Spain anytime soon. Italy's thinking about it. And there's a set of other countries where governments are lukewarm, and if you want to improve things, sometimes you need the public sector to set the framework and give the initial push for things to start up. So who knows, maybe in a couple of years' time in the UK we will also have an EPR scheme.
Yeah, looking forward to that day. We've certainly got lots of good uses for it if they were to put it in place, but we'll keep lobbying.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just think just on that point of where we might be in a few years' time, what's your sort of vision for where the industry might be in sort of 5, 10, 15 years?
I think it's going to be even more diverse than today, because there will always be a market for mass production, which historically in recent years in our industry has moved to the east of Europe. In the west of Europe, due to production costs, people tend to focus more on specialty products, higher added value. They really try to innovate, to find the latest trend, etc. Clearly, people will have access to a much larger array of raw materials. So the new art of the foamer will not just be to control the chemical reaction leading to the foam, but being able to select the best mix to make sustainable foams, cost competitive. So that will be a complete new challenge, and then we will have a whole set of systems for data exchange in the supply chain. We will have, because it's coming, certification schemes for recycled content, for carbon emissions, etc. Also because the law will require it. So when you look at years back, linear industry producing foam by the kilometer, it's going to be completely different in 10 years' time. So it's almost a rebirth of foam 75 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. And only at the start of that journey. So despite a material that's been around for, as you say, 75 years, it does feel quite a young industry as it moves into that more, rather than how do we make foam sustainable, how do we make sustainable foam?
I think that was an exceptional place to finish there, Mike. Thank you so much, Michel, for joining us. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. it's lots of pause for thought as well, I think, for the next episodes of the podcast. So thank you very much.
Yep. And if people listen to us, join the PU industry. There's never a dull moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, come and join us.
And just a last point, just to thank both yourself and the team for the work you do to support the industry. I know you're a young, small, dynamic team, but certainly from what I've observed, coming into this industry in the last few years, you've really helped us lead that way forward. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I think we were very lucky to have Michel's insight there into what's happening on the grander scale around the European legislation, how it's changing, how as a trade association we're looking to drive the industry towards more sustainable actions.
Absolutely, and I think having a trade association that's so engaged in the legislation, and I think we're at a moment in time where we're seeing a lot of legislation change happen so quickly with the EU Green Deal, and being on the forefront certainly is helping us as an industry. But it was fascinating.
But what's clear is we have to collaborate. I think that's been the common theme throughout the whole podcast series, which has been great fun to record. So it's good working with you.
Likewise. Let's do another series, shall we?